Welcome back to the YouTube Strength Culture channel. Today we're going to continue the conversation on skill development and skill acquisition with the bench press and the squat, and utilize what is one of our favorite cues here, which is finish where you start. So over the past couple months, we have been really unpacking this idea of strength development from our three key factors that we have control over as lifters and coaches. Number one, we have our muscle size. Number two, we have our neuromuscular efficiency. And then number three is the idea of skill development or skill acquisition and the expression of your movements consistently and efficiently in the gym. So Charlie's been unpacking this third piece, and I thought I'm going to throw an extra video in the mix here because on Saturday we actually had our squat seminar, our first seminar since COVID hit, or our workshop, sorry. And it was actually a really good experience. We had 10 new lifters in the gym here who were learning how to squat. And the most common mistake that we were finding with the people that came to the workshop was we'd spent so much time and so much energy working on the setup of the movement, only for that setup to be lost somewhere in the transition of the lift. So we move down through our eccentric phase, we come out of the hole, and then we finish in a completely different position than we started. And the idea of almost over-cueing or over-coaching the setup is that we should be able to maintain those relative positional that tension through the system, through the core musculature, through the hips, through the feet, through the upper back. We should be able to maintain all of those structural positions throughout the lift. And then ultimately, we should be able to finish where we start. So I want you to enter your sort of more tempo-based work or your more skill development work in the gym floor with that idea that you should finish your reps where you start. Let's head down the gym. We're going to unpack some squatting, a squatting example. Didier's down there, so we might use him. And then we're also going to unpack a bench example as well. So when we talk about the squat, we have two main references from an input standpoint that we're trying to pick up when we're executing a squat. The most important reference when it comes to squatting, is your feet and where the pressure in your feet are. A good example of finishing where you start is if Didier unracks the bar. In the setup of the squat, you guys know that we like to cue midfoot pressure. We think that holding your midfoot gives you variability, both moving forward with our center of mass and also moving backwards with our center of mass. So if Didier finds his midfoot pressure, he's going to shift backwards onto his heels, he's going to shift forward onto his toes, and then find that midpoint. I need Didier to finish exactly in that midpoint. So he's going to do a couple good reps here, just 2 good reps. He's going to come down and then he's going to finish exactly in that same position from his midfoot pressure standpoint. However, if you're going through a skill development phase of training, you're using tempos, pauses, all of these things that Charlie's unpacked over the past couple of weeks, and if you find your midfoot pressure to start, but then you execute your movement and finish on your toes, looks something like this, not too aggressive, but something on your toes, and then you have to re-find midfoot at the top, it means that somewhere in that transition phase of moving down through the squat and coming back up, you've actually lost one of the key things that we were working on from a setup perspective. And ultimately, as I said upstairs, the reason we over-cue or over-coach the setup is that if you nail the setup, you should be able to nail the lift. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to find that midfoot with Didier, and he's going to execute at a speed that allows him to maintain the midfoot the entire time. And then when he finishes his rep, he's going to be in the midfoot, ready to go through the next rep again. So that's just one example of how utilizing this understanding of finishing where you started the rep, you may actually get better expression of skill. The other key reference point from a squatting perspective is your tension. Where you're holding tension in your upper back, where you're holding tension in your core, where you're holding tension in your hips, and where you're holding tension in your feet. In the same way that we discussed that midfoot pressure, if Didier finds a good braced position, but then executes his squat and finishes extended, as we'll see here, we've lost that reference point somewhere in the squat. So what Didier should be trying to do is finishing where he starts. So he's going to move down into the squat. And then as he's coming up, he's self-organizing himself to a point where he's finished exactly where he was at the start of the rep. Perfect. So ultimately, this is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be a little bit more challenging when the load is placed on the barbell and when we add speed and velocity into the movement itself. However, we need to be using this idea from the start of our warm-up sets all the way through to our working sets. And using our warm-up sets can be a fantastic example of how we can get the most out of our training and all of our training volume if we go in with the intent to actually execute in this way, finishing where you start. So another example of how we can use this idea of finishing where you start in training is in the bench press. And I actually picked this up from my very first coach, John Paul Cowkey, 5 strong, the Strength Fortress. And this is something that really helped me develop my skill in the bench press and really progressed my bench press. And it's still something that we use pretty much weekly here with our newer lifters or people undergoing technical changes for their bench press. So the most common breakdown in bench press that we see, and an example again of this not finishing where you start concept, is where the barbell finishes each and every rep. And for this sort of game, we're going to use some reference points on the wall. Didier is obviously looking all the way up the ceiling there because his eyes are looking up there. However, for you guys, we can see this brick wall here, and I'll get Donnie to overlay some reps for us of where this barbell is actually going to be finishing every single rep. So this would be an example of something that we commonly see, where we see this slight deviation from rep to rep. So Didier is going to do a set of 5. And you'll notice that every single rep is finishing in a slightly different position. There's a slight deviation. Some reps are a little higher, some reps are a little lower. From the side as well, we may see some reps moving forward or backwards relative to the shoulder position. But ultimately, we're not finishing where we start. As opposed to if Didier undertakes a set with the idea of finishing where he starts, his goal is to get the barbell to finish exactly where the previous rep started. So it's going to be the same every time. And again, if Donnie overlays this correctly, we're going to see far more consistencies from this set compared to the previous set. And I think for the bench press, in the same way that we're using our foot pressure and our tension through our system in the squatting, I think the barbell is your best reference point for the bench press. The reason is you're looking at the barbell. There's no other lift where you're doing that. We can't see it in a deadlift. We can't really see it in a squat at all. However, with this, we're actually physically looking at the barbell the entire time. So we may as well use some of that information to make sure we get the most accurate, the best skill expression within our bench press. So that's it for today's video. Hopefully you got something out of it. Let us know how you go with this. The important thing is that you utilize this strategy throughout all of your sets, particularly on those days in the program or in the week, in your training week, where you're focusing more on skill expression. So those tempo days, the pauses, those variations where you're really hunting a really high quality skill expression, they're the ones where this is most important because we're using those to improve skill. So we may as well go in with the idea of actually building some consistency on where we're starting and finishing the reps. We also have a deadlift seminar that's coming up in a couple of weeks. There may be a couple of tickets left. There's only 5 left at the time of filming this. We only have 10 total, so half of them are gone. If you're interested, I'll get Donnie to throw the link in the bio. Also, if you're not following us on Instagram, make sure you follow us there because all of those sort of sessions and workshops are always going to be promoted there heavily. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, come down to the seminar and we'll see you there. Happy lifting. Done.